All right, well, let's get started. So welcome everybody. This is Myriad Real Estate Group's, I think our second Wine and Wisdom that we've ever done, our first one over Zoom. So I appreciate everybody taking some time to join us. And I have the pleasure of sitting down with Wendy Hernandez of Hernandez Family Law. And, some of the things that we're going to be talking about today are going through a divorce. We've had a really rough year this past year dealing with COVID, a lot of ups and downs. And so I thought it would be nice to sit down with Wendy and kind of discuss, some of the things that people can do to work through some of these challenging times. If divorce is on the horizon, if they're currently going through a divorce, how to deal with things after a divorce, pretty much all things divorce. So it should be a very uplifting conversation.
Yeah, totally uplifting.
Yeah. So Wendy, before we, get started, why don't you kind of give everybody a little bit of insight into who you are and your background and a little bit about your business?
Sure. So my name is, thanks, Danny. I'm excited to be on the show. And so I'm Wendy. I have been practicing law since 1996, doing almost exclusively family law since 1999. Before that, I was a criminal prosecutor and then defense attorney. So my practice is devoted to all aspects of family law, from divorce, child custody, child support, spousal maintenance, termination of parental rights, adoption, you name it, we pretty much do it. Over the last several years, in addition to having my brick and mortar practice, I've expanded into offering online programs, because what I found was a lot of people in the courtroom sitting across the room from me didn't know what they were doing. And I wanted to provide resources to people who didn't have the resources to hire an attorney to understand the process. So that brand is called Command the Courtroom. You can find it on YouTube or at commandthecourtroom.com. But that's a super quick summary of what I do.
Yeah, well, I'm very familiar with your Command the Courtroom. I think it's a really awesome thing that you kind of put out there that allow people to kind of navigate going through some of these things without having to spend the dollars on, a full-fledged attorney. Definitely kind of a simplistic version of what it is that you do. What were you going to say?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It is. And, and one of the things that I tell people, even if they have an attorney, like, Command the Courtroom is helpful, because you're going through a family law case, whether it's divorce or custody or spousal maintenance, you are your best advocate. You have to be able to stand up and speak for yourself. And to do that, you have to have the knowledge. So hopefully, whether people have attorneys or not, Command the Courtroom allows them to gain some knowledge.
Sure. So in your line of work, then, going through this and dealing specifically with COVID and everything that we've seen over the last year, have you seen an increase in divorce cases? Have you seen an increase in the need for family law? And if people are going through some of those issues, what is some of the advice that you have?
Yeah. So, Danny, you and I were talking before we went live, and one of the things that I've discovered about being a divorce and family law attorney is that we are pretty much recession proof. When we went through the recession in 2008, I didn't see a slowdown in the business at all. And then during this pandemic, yet business has actually increased. There was a part of time early in the year, like about this time last year, when it all hit the fan. I think the whole world was freaking out. Nobody knew what was going on. We didn't understand a lot about COVID. So here in Arizona, the courts shut down. All of my cases got canceled for 2.5 to 3 months. So, I was dark. We were still getting calls here and there, and it was pretty scary, from a business owner's perspective. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. I don't know what's next. But, we weathered through that 2.5 months, and more people started calling, because then what started happening was people who were being forced to spend all of their time together were, the issues in the relationship were now revealing themselves to the people, to the parties. And like Danny, you were saying before, most of the time during normal times, we all get to go to a job for at least 8 hours a day, usually more. And then we come home to our partners. So there's that space, but without the space, there's just more of an opportunity for conflict. And that's, that's what I've seen happening. And by no means am I a divorce pusher. If I am in favor of people remaining committed to each other and together if it's healthy for both of them. But if people get into a toxic or unhealthy or some sort of abusive situation, then maybe it is time to look at going to separate ways. And I think that's what a lot of people have seen. These situations have just, kind of blown up in their faces. So business is busy right now. And I have 2 other attorneys at my law firm. They're very busy. So, there are divorce issues that are happening. And then there are also a lot of child custody issues because of COVID. And especially in the beginning, there were arguments over, well, mom is not as careful about isolating or distancing or whatever. So we were seeing a lot of cases going to judges or people violating court orders over the custody piece of it. And for a while, when school started going back into session, there were disputes over whether does the kid stay home and do remote learning or does the kid go back to school. So COVID, has created more than just the health issues. There's a lot of family law issues, and I'm sure a lot of new law that's going to come out of this period in history.
That's really fascinating, and how never even dawned on me that you could have, case law come out of COVID based on, setting the precedent for how to, get through these things and these discussions and these disputes. So let's kind of rewind it back and if somebody is in, at wit's end, they've been trapped or they've been working from home, teaching from home, and they're with their family 24/7, and they're just, they've had it. And so divorce is the way to go. So what are people's options? What advice do you give them as the initial steps that they should take?
Yeah. So, one of the first things is a person needs to start thinking ahead to what is life going to look like, because divorce changes a whole bunch of dynamics, and and it depends. It depends on how long the parties have been married. It depends on whether they have kids. Was one parent a stay-at-home parent or never worked during the marriage, even though the children are grown and gone? So, if people are going through a divorce, they have to think ahead and determine what their needs are going to look like down the road, what their life is going to look like down the road. If they own a house, for example, which is your specialty, Danny, like, is somebody going to be able to refi and buy the other person out? And if that happens a lot of times, as Danny, you might know, I know you're a special real estate commissioner. There are disputes over the buy-sell process as people are going through divorce. How much are they going to sell it for? There are going to be repairs made. So think about where you're going to live. If there's a home, is somebody going to buy someone out, or is the home going to be sold? And then how are the proceeds going to be used? So that's an issue too. And that kind of intertwines with, well, is there debt? Are the parties in debt? Do they have credit card debt? Is there student loan debt? Is there car debt? Is it a reasonable thing to consider whether or not that equity, from a refi, cash out refi, or a home sale would be used to pay down or pay off community debt? Or are the parties just going to get, each party gets his or her share? Once the living aspect of it, is decided, meaning what's going to happen with the community living situation, you have to figure out, like, where are you going to go? Are you going to rent a place? Are you going to rent an apartment? Are you going to rent a house? Are you going to take your equity and buy your own little place? And so, especially for people who maybe were the stay-at-home parent or stay-at-home spouse, buying a residence post-divorce gets into whole other issues, because what if there was never income that was earned? And, as a lot of people know, part of the home qualification process is showing what kind of income you can earn to support that monthly payment. And I've had many clients over the years, mostly women, who have difficulty getting their own residence post-divorce, even if there's a lot of money that was part of the marriage, because they may not have that income post-divorce. And so, speaking of income post-divorce, another issue to look at is, does a party qualify for spousal maintenance? That's another phrase for alimony. People frequently think of spousal maintenance as alimony. So it's like support of a spouse who normally can't meet his or her reasonable needs. Usually that's what the court looks at. You know, once this divorce is done, can the person who's asking for spousal buy food, you know, and pay for a roof over his or her head? There are exceptions in Arizona, for example, if the spouse supported the educational opportunities of the other spouse, that would probably entitle them to an automatic award of spousal maintenance. So there are so many moving pieces when it comes to divorce, and I haven't even dipped my toe into the pool of child custody, you know, and that's a huge pool. And there are a lot of undercurrents, there are a lot of pitfalls, there are a lot of traps, there's a lot of things to know when it comes to sharing time with a child, sharing custody of a child. In Arizona, they call custody legal decision-making authority, which is a parent's ability to make major decisions about a child or children. And major decisions mean major medical, educational, religious, or personal care decisions in Arizona. So if parties share joint decision-making authority, they make those decisions together. Nobody trumps the other person. But if one person has sole, then that person can do pretty much whatever they want, what they think is in the best interest of the children. And then there's like a hybrid between those two, which is joint decision-making with one party having final say. So the parties still have to communicate with each other, but if they don't agree, the person having final say can make the final call. So there's the decision-making piece in Arizona, and then there's a parenting time piece, which is different. And that means, what does each parent's time look like with the children? So does that make sense, Danny?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. You're on a wonderful roll. So I hope that you'll keep going and talking about custody and specifically, I'd love to know, you know, you kind of touched on this earlier, that dealing with custody during COVID, you know, what if there are disputes between parents on what to do about COVID and going back to school? I mean, these are major questions. You know, how do people navigate that?
Oh, you know, it's like not a one-size-fits-all answer that I can give, because this is the thing about family law, is that there is a lot that's left to the discretion of each individual judge. And I don't know how many judges there are in Maricopa County, family law judges. I would venture to say 30, 40, or 50 of them. So each of these judges is coming from, you know, different backgrounds. You know, some of them may have come from divorced families, some may not have. You know, some may be very conservative, others may not be. So when you go in front of a judge, you're kind of stuck with that judge's, you know, their background, their experience, and the mood that they are in that day. So you may take the same set of facts in front of one judge down the hall and get a completely different result than you would from a judge at the other end of the hall. And that is, in my opinion, the terrifying thing about family law, because if parties cannot work together to make decisions that are best for their family, that are fair, that are in the best interest of the children, then a third party is going to make those decisions for the family. And in my experience in Maricopa County, because judges are so overwhelmed with cases, usually we as attorneys don't have a lot of time to present our cases. And as an example, just 3 days ago on Monday, I had a hearing, an emergency hearing, and we had a total of 30 minutes to present that case to the judge, the emergency hearing and all the relevant facts. And so what that means is each party had 15 minutes to present their side of things, including exhibits. And it's incredibly stressful. It's difficult to get this information in for the parties and for the attorneys. But even more difficult thing in my mind is that your judge is making decisions based on hearing 15 minutes of your life. It's like a snapshot. There's no way they can tell or know everything. So I encourage people, when it's possible, they should try to work together to reach agreements that truly are best for their family, because they're the ones that know their family best. They're the ones that know the situation the best. And judges are human. They make mistakes. Sometimes attorneys forget to mention facts or admit evidence, so the judge is not making a decision based on everything. And there are like so many errors that can happen in the trial process, in the hearing process. So people should see what they can settle, and even if they can't settle everything, even settling a few things reduces the number of issues for trial. And then you go to trial, you do your best, and you hope for the best. It's not always possible to settle, especially I see in like custody cases where there's been abuse. Often those are difficult cases to settle, and a party feels like, you know, I need to have the judge hear this and have, you know, I need to have my day in court so the judge can enter an order that is in the best interest of the children. Oftentimes with spousal maintenance cases, and most often it's a woman who's asking that her husband, her soon-to-be ex-husband, support her. And in almost all cases that I've been involved in, not all of them, but in almost all, those cases go to trial too. They're hotly contested. So I don't remember what the question was, Danny, but I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, you're fine. You're fine. That's the point of this, is to kind of just be free flowing. So, you know, are there any instances in those cases where instead of going in front of a judge that you would recommend using maybe mediation to have an independent third party that can spend a little bit more time going back and forth?
Yes. So yes, totally. And there's a few ways that people can mediate cases or settle cases. And, you know, so one way is by exchanging communications with the other party. Like it could be emails if it's just you and the other party, or if there are attorneys involved, the attorneys could exchange letters. And sometimes this works. A lot of times it works. Sometimes it gets expensive because so many letters go back and forth over the course of months, but that is one way. Another way is called an informal settlement conference. And what that means is that the parties and their attorneys, if they have attorneys, meet informally without the presence of a neutral third party, and they just sit down and they try to hammer it out. Informal settlement conferences do not have to be with attorneys. I've had lots of clients in the past who say, hey, let's go sit down in Starbucks and write this out. And they bring me the agreement, and that's kind of it. So informal settlement conferences work. Then there's court-ordered mediation, which in Maricopa County, Arizona, it's called alternative dispute resolution. And the court would order the parties to a session with, it's usually a very experienced family law practitioner in the community. And the great thing about court-ordered mediation, it's really low cost. I mean, maybe $100 or $200 for the mediator time. And then the people have to pay for their attorney time, of course. But the problem is it's in such high demand that right now they're scheduling mediations out into August and September of this year. So for people who want court-ordered mediation in Maricopa County, they're going to be waiting a long time, which is not ideal if they want to get their case done. And then the other type of mediation that parties could participate in is private mediation. And private mediation is where there's a neutral third party present. A lot of times it is a family law attorney in the community. There are plenty of attorneys in the community who have mediation practices in Phoenix. I've done mediations in the past. And the parties pay for the cost of the mediator. Usually they split the cost of the mediator. And then if they have attorneys, they each pay for their attorney's time. It's more expensive usually, but the benefit to private mediation is you can usually get in pretty quickly depending on everybody's schedule. You don't have to wait 8 months. And then there's another type of law that's called collaborative law, collaborative divorce. Have you ever heard of that, Danny?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so collaborative divorce, it's been around a while. I think it's been around about 30 years now, but it's not widely known. And it's a process that involves several professionals that assist the parties in reaching an agreement that meets the needs of the family. So this is the thing as an attorney. I don't like numbers, and I'm not an accountant. You know, I'm not a financial advisor, and I can't make projections into the future. So, you know, it's helpful to have somebody in this role. And oftentimes when there are huge financial issues, I get an accountant involved. Also, as an attorney, I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. That's a lot of what I do, but like, it's wonderful when I can get an actual mental health professional who's supporting me with the issues that come up, because a lot of times these mental health issues get in the way of resolution. So with collaborative divorce, you bring a team together that includes an attorney for each party. There is a financial professional who helps with the numbers and breaks things down, can help with the child support. And then there are mental health professionals, usually for each of the parties, to help with the mental health stuff that comes up. And if there are children, there may or may not be an attorney that is representing the interests of the children or speaking for the children. So in collaborative divorce, people come together for a series of meetings and they work things out. They sign a contract at the beginning saying that they agree not to go to litigation. Of course, they can break that agreement, and if they do, then none of the professionals who have been involved in the process can help them, including their own attorney. They have to go find somebody new and start from scratch. But that is another alternative for dispute resolution in the family law process. I mean, you can do it in any type of law, but the thing is about that is it can get expensive.
I was going to say, you get all those professionals in one room. It sounds very expensive.
It can be expensive. And, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. Like, in a lot of cases, you start with a little triangle, the point of a triangle at the bottom. I don't know if I can do it. And, so the costs get bigger as the case go on, right? Case goes on, the triangle gets wider. And, especially if it goes on for years, which I have cases that have. And collaborative divorce, it's often described that the base, the wide base of the triangle is at the very beginning. That's where all the money is. But then it comes to a point with less costs and more quickly as time goes on. So I am trained to do collaborative divorce. I don't do a lot of them. And I have done some that fall apart. But it's an option for people out there who would like the extra support of professionals. As an attorney, I love having, a financial expert that I can say, I don't understand these numbers, can you help me? And they say yes, and then they hand me a report. I love that.
So, I'm in real estate and it's super hard to buy homes right now. And I've had clients that are going through divorces and each of them needs a home, and it's challenging. And so a lot of them end up staying in the home that they're in while they're looking both for that next home for each of them. And so, do you have recommendation for those individuals that might still be cohabitating while divorced or even going through a divorce?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult situation. I've had several people over the years who have done that. It takes special people to do that. And I would certainly ask people to think twice about that if there's been any kind of abuse in the relationship, whether it be verbal, emotional, or financial, for the person who's being abused. It may not be a healthy situation, and there are a lot of services out there that can help for people in those situations.
What are those types of, to just interject, what are those services that people can turn to? Because I would imagine if you're in that position, you probably feel trapped.
Totally. So, there's various legal aid organizations in Maricopa County that you can reach out to for assistance, for help with representation. In Maricopa County, there is the Self-Help Center, and I think probably all counties in Arizona and probably throughout the nation have self-help centers where you can go and meet with a volunteer lawyer and they help you fill out paperwork or point you in the right direction. So those are a couple of services. And for somebody who's in a situation like that and they're going to be going through divorce, it is possible to ask for and obtain what are called temporary orders. There's no guarantee, but what has to happen is when you file your divorce paperwork, you ask the court to enter some orders pending trial. And, one of the orders could be that you get spousal maintenance, for example, or that you get, one-time stipend, you get set up in a house, for the deposits and things like that, or you get a lump sum payment for XYZ, or you get an advance on the property that you're going to eventually get as part of the divorce. Or you could even ask for the court to order attorney's fees and costs. That way you can go out and get an attorney to represent your interests. So, there is help. And I would say if anybody is putting themselves or their children in a situation where there is danger of them getting harmed in some way, you need to reach out for help, even if it's just at your church or, your community. I have a family right now and they have a fund, they have a group of people who are donating to the legal fund of the person that I'm helping. So there are resources out there. There's hope. Don't lose hope. I always tell people, like, there's a way out. Don't lose hope. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your kids.
Those are some great resources. So I appreciate that. So then to get back to kind of the initial question was, so say you're not in an abusive situation, but you're having to cohabitate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a toughie. So, well, if people are able to cohabitate and go through a divorce, and I would think that things are somewhat civil, I would hope. My thought would be that people need to establish some ground rules for living together, meaning, what are the rules going to be? Like, where is each party going to be allowed to go? Is one party going to have exclusive use and access to a bedroom? Are the parties going to be able to remove things from the home? Who's going to be buying food? How are the utilities going to be split? How's the mortgage payment going to be split? So, people get into trouble when there are no clear expectations, when there are no boundaries set, and then they start arguing, usually over money. So if you choose to do that, I would say you need to write down a list of all the potential issues that could come up living together, and then come up with rules. In Arizona, people can enter into what are called Rule 69 agreements. So Rule 69 refers to the Arizona law, rules of family law procedure. And the Rule 69 agreement is essentially a contract between parties that is a binding contract. And in a family law case, parties can arrive, upon agreements, any agreements between themselves. They sign it, they date it, and in Arizona, it's considered a binding contract, whether or not it's been filed, or lodged with the court. Now, one party can say, well, it wasn't binding, or I was forced, but that's something to be taken up with the court. But usually a court will hold both parties to a Rule 69 agreement. So I would say for people who choose to cohabitate pending a divorce case, clear expectations and boundaries, and reduce it to writing, because this is another important point, Danny. Over the years, I've had so many people tell me, well, he agreed with me verbally, or she agreed that I didn't have to pay child support anymore, and I haven't been paying it for years with no problem, but now when I got a new girlfriend, now it's a problem. And verbal agreements are as good as the paper that they're written on, and there's no paper that they're written on, so that means they're no good. Judge is not going to pay attention to verbal agreements. So if there's an agreement, get it in writing. That's one of my best pieces of advice for people.
Yeah, I once had a client that was cohabitating, and they were going through a divorce, and one got the upstairs and one got the downstairs. The only problem was obviously the kitchen, and then kind of coming and going. So they made a schedule. And so whoever had the upstairs could go downstairs into the kitchen, during certain times. And so they were very transparent and kind of had that initial agreement on who could use what, when, but essentially painted, like a 90s sitcom, painted a, stripe down the center of the house. And that's your side and this is my side.
Yeah, that's crazy. But I've seen stuff like that happen. So
sure. There's a term that I've heard, and I don't quite understand what it is, but it's called bird nesting. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So, it's referred in my world, commonly we just call it nesting. It doesn't happen a lot. I had a case recently where the parties tried it for a bit, didn't work. Ultimately, long term. But what it is, so the theory behind it is that children are best served when they have consistency and stability in their lives. And so what that means is, for some people, is not a lot of shuttling back and forth between parents' homes, keeping the kids where they're used to, with their own bedrooms and their stuff and their yards and the neighbors and the friends. So the theory behind nesting is to maintain consistency and stability for the children as the family is going through this transition. So with nesting, what happens is, instead of the children going back and forth for parenting time, the parents are moving in and out of the house, or they're sharing the house for each parent's respective time. So say mom has week one from Sunday to Sunday, then mom would be in the home, the former community home with the kids. And then when it was dad's turn, mom would move out, and it would be dad's time in the home. So, you know, I imagine there are people that works for. You know, in one of the recent situations I had, it just didn't work because one of the parties, in my opinion, wasn't being respectful of the other party and just leaving the house like a mess. And then by the time the other party got to the house, there was no food left. And, you know, so one party was always cleaning up and buying food, and it just didn't work out.
It sounds like a good idea in theory, like it would be really good for the kids, but seems like it would have a lot of challenges because now you need 3 homes, right? Because when you're not staying at the house, you got to stay somewhere else. And then you're trusting the other person to respect your belongings, not trash the place. And, you know, like you said, food, it just sounds very challenging.
Yeah, I think it takes a couple of very special people to make that work. And like I said, I think that probably there are people who could make it work. You know, a special person, you know, that would make it work would be a person who's willing to probably overlook a lot and let conflict go and turn the other cheek, which is not easy for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you see any long-term ramifications from COVID and, you know, what the future kind of looks like for families and divorce going forward? Do you have kind of any hypothesis on what COVID may set us up for in the future?
Well, you know, gosh, I don't know. I know I've never been asked that question, Danny, but I really, long term, you know, I think that there will be an infrastructure that we've experienced in case something like this ever happens again. And I'm certain that there's new law, you know, the higher courts, the courts of appeal and superior and Supreme Courts that have been, you know, there's rulings. But I think that once things normalize, I think it's probably going to be business as usual. The thing is, even during COVID, and even like when the numbers were crazy high here in Arizona, I mean, we're talking like 10,000 cases a day new. What the policy was the court order needs to be followed. Whatever the parenting plan is, it needs to be followed unless and until somebody changes it. And, you know, I was on both sides of this dispute. With the parent not wanting to follow the court order for whatever reason, and also on the part of the parent who felt like they were getting ripped off because the other parent was not following it. And all, you know, both of these clients had really great, legitimate points. There are 2 sides to every story, but you know, the rule of the courts is like, you know, we gotta draw a line. There are rules and orders in place for a reason, and people have to follow them. And if there's not a reason to follow them, then they need to come back to court, essentially. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I feel like things already have gotten more back to normal with the kids and sharing decision-making and parenting time. And probably by the end of summer, when kids are going back to school, I anticipate that we will, you know, be getting back to just the normal disputes instead of all the disputes about COVID.
Yeah. I sure hope so. It feels like there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel, for sure. So, you know, are there any topics that I didn't kind of touch on or ask you about that you really wanted to dive into during this session?
Well, you know, one thing that I will say that like, this is like my mantra, you know, this is my rally cry, especially for those people who are going through this stuff, you know, and they have kids. You have to think of the best interest of the children always. And that's not always an easy thing. It's not always an easy thing because what's in the best interest of the children may not always be what a person wants for themselves. And so it requires a person to kind of rise above their own needs, their own wants, their own desire, their own ego, their own pride, and think about what is best for the kids. You know, even if the other side has been a jerk, even if they've done you wrong, you got to look at what's best for the kids. And so in every jurisdiction, there are factors that are called the best interest factors, and people need to be familiar with those factors wherever they are. In Arizona, the statute section is Arizona Revised Statute 25-403, and you can find the best interest factors there. Because if you're going through this, you need to know what they are, because that is what the judge is most interested in, is what's best for the kids and how do these factors apply to your case. Um, I created a checklist. It's called the Best Interest Checklist. It's at commandthecourtroom.com. People can download it for free. And several years ago, I did a survey of all 50 states and basically wrote up all the factors from all 50 states and put them in one checklist along with questions to prompt a party to ask themselves, you know, to hopefully help them arrive at a conclusion about what's best for the kid in this case, or the kids. So people can access that resource for free. But, you know, when it's about kids, always think what's best about what's best for them. Because if you do that, I don't think you'll ever go wrong with the court. Doesn't mean you'll get what you want, but hopefully you'll get what's best for the kids. And the kids are the most important things, you know, in these cases and really in our future. So.
Do you have recommendation for parents that are co-parenting over long distances?
Well, you know, so people, frequent communication is important in my opinion, and healthy communication, of course, is always important. So, and again, that's not always easy, even for attorneys, but
they say open communication is the key to marriage. So I imagine if you're ending up in this situation, that communication's probably been an issue for a while.
Probably. You know, it's important for each party to keep the other one informed. And there are some judges who order parties to exchange summaries, or orders one party to give the other party a summary, like say one party's in Maine and the other party's in Arizona. You know, the party who's in Arizona who has the kid may be ordered to give the Maine parent a summary every Sunday just to keep that person in the loop. I think that's a good practice for parties to get into, whether it's ordered or not. You know, and just to tell the other parents, even if you're in the same town, listen, you know, we had parenting time from Friday to Sunday. We went to the park, we watched a movie, you know, we ordered pizza one night, you know, Johnny had a good time, no problem sleeping. That's it. Like, so the more the communication, the better. And hopefully parties will never end up in court again, but whether they're in the same town or in different states, if you can show that you have made an effort to communicate with the other parent, that will be good for you. That will show the court that you're attempting to co-parent. If you don't respond to communications from the other parent, you don't provide input when you're asked for it, then that's going to show that maybe you're not open to co-parenting, which ultimately could affect the custody, the decision-making arrangement that you receive, and perhaps even parenting time.
Well, Wendy, this has been really fascinating. Again, I really appreciate the time. I think our audience appreciates it as well. And what I really took away from all of this is over-communicate and document. Like that seems to be very key in most of these situations.
Totally, Danny. Well, I am honored that you would have me on your show.
Wendy, if people need to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Oh, yes. So if you are in Arizona, you have an Arizona case, go to hernandezfirm.com. My website just got updated like last week, hernandezfirm.com, and you can set up a consultation there. And, you know, Command the Courtroom, if you're interested in Command the Courtroom, I have live videos every Monday. I have like almost 300 videos on the Command the Courtroom YouTube channel. So just go into YouTube and type in Command the Courtroom, or go to commandthecourtroom.com, but for sure download that best interest checklist.
Perfect. Well, that music sounds like that's a great way to end the end the discussion. So thanks again, Wendy. Thank you everybody for tuning in. And yeah, again, my name is Daniel Brown with Myriad Real Estate Group here in Phoenix. And thank you to our guest, Wendy Hernandez of Hernandez Law.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.